You're listening to an exclusive podcast from the Zoomer Podcast Network.
Now, Fight Back with Libby Znaimer on Zoomer Radio.
Good afternoon and welcome. It's Monday, time for our Zoomer Squad. And here's the main question. We are talking about reopening while we have surpassed the worst of it. And this comes after concerted pressure from the business community. And it would be a break, especially for small businesses, which have been totally disadvantaged by the regime, which allowed big box stores to stay open while they had to close. Here's what Mayor John Tory thinks.
I do hear that smaller businesses that have been largely closed, those being in sort of retail as opposed to indoor dining, but that the retail side might get some dispensation to allow some people inside their stores, which I think would be terrific because I think they've been operating under a somewhat unfair regime in that the big box stores have been open and they've all been closed. And I'm certainly urging that be the case, but we'll see.
Well, indeed, we'll see. The other side of the coin, of course, is the worry that we're opening too soon, just as the new, more contagious variants are spreading. Kids are going back to school, and after the Super Bowl, which may have been a super spreader event. And now let's go to Rocco Rossi, President and CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, along with Donna Dewar, co-owner of Mildred's Temple Kitchen here in Liberty Village, and Nadine Devereux-Yaculo, the co-owner of CapoSalerno Italian Fashion in Toronto. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Okay, let's begin with Rocco. And I think, Rocco, this is your first time on the show. Welcome. Thanks for being with us. What do you know? What are you expecting?
I'm hopeful that we're going to have some reopening. I certainly expect a regional approach as happened after the first lockdown. Dr. Bogosh basically said, look, he couldn't make sense of big boxes being open and small retailers not, so long as you have the steps in place, you can have safe, large ones. So reopening is not less vigilant, it's more vigilant.
Nadine Devereux, how much has the current rules, how much has that disadvantaged you? And if you are allowed to open on a limited basis, is that going to help you hang in?
Well, with the lockdown itself, it's been really hard because we've been closed back in November before Christmas. Seeing some of the other regions still operating a few weeks before Christmas, whereas we weren't, it was hard. We've had a tough time. We've been struggling for sure, like most other small businesses out there. I think that we've been fortunate because, for one, we have a landlord that understands our situation. So he's been great with us for that. But moving forward, if we're able to actually open, it will help us. I do understand, why we had to have the lockdown, everything else. But one thing is that for us as a small business, we took precautionary measures. We have HEPA filters with UV lights. We have front and back door to allow for fresh air to flow through, which was one of the biggest concerns that the government had as small businesses. We can't control whether or not they have these things, but if we can reopen, it will help us, definitely.
Yeah. The argument that they had about keeping small businesses closed is that they weren't so much worried about customers, but they were worried about employees infecting each other. The whole thing to me is, it just made no sense at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I would be watching the newscasts and reading the articles of what was being said. It didn't quite make a whole lot of sense to allow small businesses to not operate whatsoever except for curbside pickup. But then, you've got these big box stores and they're just, I hate to say it, but they're loading the people in. I went to Costco. I went to Walmart. I saw what was going on. As a small business owner, I was angry. I wanted to see what's exactly happening here. Are they controlling? And not to the point that they should have been, not to what Ford was hoping, which was the 50% capacity. I don't understand why they couldn't have just blocked the aisles for the non-essentials. If they can do it when they need to do an aisle maintenance or an aisle change, why can't they do it during COVID? This is the most important time that they should be really limiting things. Small businesses like ours, it's my husband and I, we have our few employees as well. But even with our customers, I know my customers, I have their phone numbers, I know where they live, I know their children and their parents in most cases. So I can trace everybody that comes through my store.
Okay, Donna Dewar, there's no plan to reopen restaurants for in-house dining. How are you doing with the takeout thing?
Well, Libby, we are, like everybody out there who's operating a small business, struggling. And I think the restaurant environment is very unique in that you have a situation where people are coming into your space, but at some point they do take their masks off to eat and drink and talk, and we try to manage that as best we can. So I feel that the government has blanketed this one size fits all. And listening to Nadine speak about her situation, hers is a very different scenario from a restaurant situation. We do see a big demand for takeout, for curbside. I don't think you would see that demand for, tailored clothing and something as specialized as she's doing. So it's very difficult to look at each individual business and say, you can do this, you can't do that. And I suppose the government didn't have much choice but to put this blanket across the board on the lockdown. But I do agree wholeheartedly that I think there was some unfairness when it came to the big box stores.
Do you have a sense of how many businesses are on the brink?
Conceivably, 1 and 2 restaurants by the end of this, depending on how long, could be closed permanently. We're looking at upwards of 200,000 businesses, primarily small businesses across Canada, being potential victims of this. And that's, that's not just businesses, that's people's dreams, that's their lives, that's opportunities. In January alone, Canada saw 200,000 job decline, and those declines, directly relate to a ton of businesses that were put through the lockdown. So it's tough. What will determine, though, at the end is, how quickly will the vaccination roll out?
Nadine, Rocco raised a very interesting point. We're in the emergency now. There are emergency measures, but what about a year or a year and a half into it when some of the businesses that made it through the emergency are looking at their books, are looking at debts? And, when I think of a fashion store, I love fashion. I buy way too many clothes, but at this point, I have nowhere to wear them.
Yeah,
Even I am stopping.
We had to change our entire concept. We had to go to more of like the casual at-home cozy wear, right? So it was hard for us to have to pivot in that way, but you have to pivot in this situation that we're in. Now, to your point, though, when these businesses have to look back at their books and they see that they've taken on these loans that they might not be able to pay back, I think that there's going to be a big problem. I mean, it's great the government's doing these things for the funding and that to try to help out, but it's a Band-Aid.
Rocco Rossi, we have like about 30 seconds left. What would you like to leave us with, and what is most important here?
Stay positive and test negative. The government's got to keep the support coming. People have to keep being creative and pivoting. In the cities, we thankfully have far more access to broadband than in rural regions, so that rural divide needs to be bridged. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccines. The tunnel's still long, but it's coming. Let's do our part. And let's stay vigilant even if the reopening comes.
Okay, well, always good to end on a positive note. Thank you so much, Rocco Rossi, Donna Dewar, and Nadine Debreu-Yaculo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you.
Thank you so
Okay.
much, Libby, for having us.
Okay, and that is all the time we have for today.
You're listening to an exclusive podcast of Fight Back on Zoomer Radio.